Hey guys, I hope you're well. Just a bit of fun today. I thought I'd do this comparison video on these four straps here, just to see, from a cheap NATO through to a more expensive one, or much more expensive one. Where does the money go? Why do some cost more than others? Which is the best value for money, in my opinion, and things like that. I'm an amateur. This is a mobile phone on a windowsill, so be gentle. And also, these are all my own straps. I bought them all. I'm not affiliated with these brands, so I'll say what I want. And yeah, just take it as a bit of fun, really. Quick thing then. So start with a wrist check. So I'm wearing a Deluxe leather with my Grand Seiko SPGH 269. Got this strap recently, and it's kind of like revitalised my love of this watch, because the bracelet that comes with Grand Seikos is a bit pants, and then maybe that's a video for another day, I don't know. So now that that's out of the way, we'll get on to the kind of question in hand, which is these straps. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is just the material of them. So the cheapest one is quite cheap, quite scratchy. Bendy enough, malleable, pliable. It's not offensive, but it's certainly the cheapest of the bunch. The other three are much more of a seatbelt material. The Bark and Jack one is actually the softest, the bendiest of them all. I'd probably actually say it's the comfiest of them all, for my own personal preference. The Bulang and Son is a much thicker, or it's not actually thicker. It just feels it. It's kind of less bendy. Feels a bit more chunky on the edges, I think, because of the stitching. It's a bit more glossy in terms of its texture than the Bark and Jack. But again, similar sort of material. Personal preference over those two, though, is I think this is the comfier, nicer material. And then this Omega strap here that came with my Speedmaster Professional is again kind of a nylon, I think, seatbelt type material. It's comfy. Nice. It's kind of a good mix of being kind of chunky and substantial without losing that kind of flexibility that makes a NATO strap so comfortable. The edges of the straps then, the cheapest NATO's one is much cheaper. I can't get it to focus for you. There you go. It's kind of not rough on the edges, but it's certainly not finished to any standard. And as you get to the end of the strap, it's the kind of the roughest cut and finish of all of them. It's perfectly functional. It's just comparing it to these straps, it doesn't sit in the same league, and that's obviously to be expected with the price of them. The Bark and Jack has very nice soft edges through to a very nice clean finish on the end. And I think that's either a hot cut or some glue or both, just to get that kind of burnt shoelace sealed end there that's going to last a while compared to the cheaper one. The Bulang and Sons again has this kind of like stitching down the side. I think that's what makes it feel chunkier. You can see there in the texture and the way it catches the light, there's some sort of edge stitching going on there almost. And then we get to, again, this kind of glued end, which actually there's more on this one than there is in the Bark and Jack. It almost feels like there's too much. But I don't know if that's, they've got longevity in mind and they just put a bit more glue on there to make sure that it's going to stick together forever. And then the Omega one is, the edge finishing is the best of the lot, really. It feels really rugged, but it's soft, comfy. The end cut is much more squared off. Again, it's got that kind of hot glue, or hot cut kind of finish. I don't know how they get the cut on it. I think it's a hot cut. But yeah, that's obviously kind of like the best of the bunch in that respect. One of the interesting points with these straps, and this is true for anything that I look at, is always go to the place where people aren't going to look, and that's where you'll find out what sort of quality item you're looking at. So under the pass, you go to the final keeper and look at this bit here, where they've finished the strap basically. The cheapest NATO's is been cut, folded over and glued. Nothing fancy, does the job, but it's not pretty. It's just serves a purpose basically. The Bark and Jack one, you'll see, is an absolute mile away from that. It's very clean cut. The stripes line up, very clean stitching on the end there. It's got the same sort of cut as you have on the end of the strap. Looks like it was made to last a while or a very long time. It's very nicely finished, and yeah, very happy with that. And you can also see that etching, which I'll talk about the engraving in a little bit. The Bulang and Son is the same sort of affair. It actually isn't finished as well as the Bark and Jack really at all. There's quite a large imperfection there, but maybe that comes from it being a chunkier strap, I don't know. But obviously holding them together, the Bark and Jack is better in that respect. Final one is the Amiga, and again, it's actually not cut as square as the Bark and Jack one. I think the stitching is probably a little bit better, but overall, if I was to hold them together, I think the Bark and Jack one is actually the best of the bunch in here. So that's a real testament to Adrian and his shop and the quality you're getting with that strap. I was really impressed with that. The holes in all of them, they're all kind of, you can't really say much about them. This one has worn the most out of all of them. They've all had roughly even sort of wear. The Bark and Jack and the more expensive ones have kind of where this is just cut, so it will fray and they'll pull it over time. These have got more of that kind of glue or hot cut where they've been finished on the inside and then been sealed up, so they won't fray as quickly. At least I think that's the thinking. So talking about the keepers, this is something that is subjective. There's obviously two types of keepers with a NATO of these, these double pass varieties. You've got a fixed keeper and you've got a floating keeper. My preference is just a floating keeper because you can basically, you get more adjustability and you can make it fit your own wrist or ankle, wherever you decide to wear your watch. You can just make it fit a bit better, and for that reason I just think that a floating keeper is just better. These keepers, they're cheap, they do a job, but they don't do anything special. One thing they have got going for them is they're nicely rounded, so if you like to do the under NATO wrap, go and check out on Google if you haven't seen that, where you tuck all the NATO underneath here and you hide it away so you get a nice fabric strap look. This strap's really good for that, the others not so much, but that's basically the only positive of this one. The Bark and Jack one's got some lovely fine brushing, no sharp edges. They're kind of rectangular with soft kind of a radius in there as well, so a nice kind of look to it. And again, as I said earlier, you've got that etching which is really well done. And if I just sidetrack for a second here, I don't know if I'm going to be able to hold them both together at the same time. So if you look at the two of them together, I would actually say, and I've looked at these under a loop, the Bark and Jack engraving or etching, however it's done, is better than the Amiga one. So again, bravo in that respect, Adrian. So the Bulang and Son one has this kind of strange, quite heavily chamfered, kind of rugged look to the keepers. They're stitched in really quite tight, so there's no movement on them at all, which is there is on this one. It means it holds its shape, but to me, when I wear a NATO, I want it to wrap around my wrist. I want the strap to move around me. I don't want the strap to be like this. This kind of reminds me almost of like a new alligator strap where it's a bit stiff. So personal preference, that's not to my taste, but this does make, for a reasonably comfy strap. The Amiga has the longest floating keeper of all of them, compared to the Bark and Jack one. Keepers themselves are square. This one's quite tight. There's no wiggle room on it. This one's a bit of an older strap, so it is a bit scuffed nowadays, but it's held up really well. Yeah, they're nice, but compared to say the Bark and Jack ones or the Bulang ones, they're no better. So I don't really know. I wouldn't say there's any extra cost gone into these at all. One of the final things then to talk about kind of objectively if possible is the buckle and tang. So cheap buckle, cheap tang, it just sits on top, it's free to wiggle around, holds the strap on and nothing else. Bark and Jack one, more engraving, has a lovely little indent for the tang, so it always seats nicely, sits where it should do. It has a nice undercut on the buckle that the Cheapestnato's one doesn't have, so that it kind of sits down within the buckle quite nicely when it's done up. And again, there's not much wiggle in that at all, not much play. It's a really nicely made buckle. The Bulang one, same again, nice little indent, sits in nicely, not much wiggle, feels like a nice quality strap. Little bit of kind of subjective criticism here is I don't like this buckle. I don't like the flare out, it's too big. This is a 20mm strap and you end up with a really chunky buckle, which if you're wearing something that's, you know, a slim or vintage kind of dive watch style, it just feels a little bit too chunky for my own personal tastes. The Omega one, this is where the Omega one actually gets really shown up. There's no indent, it's got an engraving. Again, if you put them under a loop, the Bark and Jack one, the Bulang and Son one is better. There's no indent, it's just a buckle. It's not, there's some kind of engraving there, but yeah, if it was me, I would have spent more money making that look nicer than having that on the bottom, to be honest. It does its job. In isolation, it's a nice buckle, but compared to these two, it doesn't feel as tactile and it doesn't feel as nice. So that's quite interesting. In terms of comfort and feel then, so obviously this is the super subjective part. This is cheap and scratchy, but it serves a purpose. This is the softest of the bunch. I would actually say some people, if you talk about perceived quality, this one feels a bit chunkier, it's a bit stiffer, a bit more substantial. I say this is a middle ground between the two of these. But if you like a chunkier feeling, or like, you know, some people like a weighty watch and they associate weight with quality and that sort of thing in heft, you'll like this more. But for me, this is really supple, it's really comfy, and it just conforms to the wrist so much nicer than any of the other straps. So in terms of comfort and feel, this hands down, the Bark and Jack strap is the best one for me. Followed, I'd say, by the Omega, then the Bulang and Sons, and then the cheapest NATOs. And that's, you know, personal preference. You might like them completely the other way around to me. The final thing I kind of want to talk about then is the value for money. And value for money, I don't think I've mentioned the prices. £4, £25, approximately £45, and approximately £130 if you were to buy one. So £4 for a strap that holds your watch on, you know, they all function as watch straps. This literally cannot be beaten. This is the best value for money, hands down, in terms of fit and finish and quality, and what actually makes, you know, a slightly nicer wearing experience. You know, if you kind of think about the kind of intangible virtues of quality as well, not just the cost, then again, I don't want to sound like I'm being a fanboy, but the Bark and Jack strap is just hands down the best. The Bulang and Sons is just a little bit too chunky for my feeling. It's kind of like artificially made to feel nicer by the fact that it's just a bit chunky, but that's personal preference. And again, the Omega, I can't justify £130 for a piece of fabric. So yeah, the winner for me is the Bulang and Sons. Bulang and Sons is the Bark and Jack strap. There you go, guys. So there's a kind of a, well, I say reasonably quick, it's been 13 minutes. There's a comparison video for you all. I'd be really interested to hear what you guys think. This is the sort of nerdy crap that I really like to look at and I enjoy thinking about while I'm sat at home on my phone on Instagram. So if you want to like and comment and have a discussion about NATOs, whether you love them, hate them, you know, some people think they look cheap and horrible. What are your thoughts on them? I'd be really interested to hear. So yeah, drop a comment below, and I'd love to get chatting to you all. And in the meantime, I hope you all kind of stay safe and, you know, continue having fun with the watch community. So yeah, take care.